All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the live stream. Welcome to the Postman live stream. I'm Ian Douglas. I'm a senior developer advocate at Postman. And with me today, I've got a handful of folks from our Postman team. Sorry to mute. There we go. So we have Apurva and we've got Giridhar with us. I'll give them a moment to introduce themselves. So hi to everyone in chat from around the world. Let us know in chat where you're coming in from. We're going to get into some pretty deep technical discussion today about how we build out some really neat stuff. So, but we're going to start with introductions. So let's start with Apurva. Why don't you give us a little bit of background on who you are, what you do at Postman, and then we'll move on to Giridhar.
Yeah, sure. So, hey everybody, I'm Apurv. I'm one of the technical leads with the largest vertical at Postman. So, I'm mostly involved with the API client side of things, which basically includes bringing support for new technology, API technologies like WebSockets, gRPC, maintaining support for the existing ones that we have, and look over their integration with the rest of the Postman ecosystem.
Awesome. And Giridhar, how about yourself?
Hello everyone, this is Giridhar. I am a product manager at Postman, looking at the API client, more specifically on the HTTP side of things. Been here for close to 2 years and actively looking to fix any of the new feature requests that you want in the REST API client and make Postman more user friendly, more featureful, and so that you all love it.
Awesome. Well, we certainly appreciate being able to give the team feedback on the product and so on. So we always love having chats with our product managers for sure. We did have someone ask, will this be recorded and posted for later view? Absolutely, yes. So we're streaming on Twitch, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Twitch and LinkedIn will have the video for a little while, but we put all of these videos up on YouTube, so you can come back and check them out. We'll have chapter notes and all the links and so on that we share today. We'll make sure to go in the video description down below as well. Awesome. Well, let's dive in a little bit. Before we get started too much with our technical talk, we do like to start with how, in case you missed it, which typically we talk about any new product releases and things like that. This week we had a blog post come out from my colleague Debo. We basically have some new documentation for how to build collections and what actually goes into the collections. So Debo wrote a really good blog article here, lots of links inside of that. So I'm going to make sure to post this in chat for everyone, and I'll make sure to post it over on LinkedIn as well, because we need to post that on both platforms. Yeah, welcome to everybody from around the world. Thanks for dropping in. And the other thing is, coming up pretty soon, we've got some new intergalactic. Oops, I realized I shared just a window, not the. Let me reshare my screen here. Sorry about that. I meant to share my entire browser window. So the other thing that we have coming up is intergalactic. So we have a lot of upcoming sessions. We've got one just in a couple of weeks. We're going to get really into Postman flows. You've seen us demo this on the live stream really recently. We were doing the ChatGPT and the sentiment analysis using flows to go control some lights. You can go check that out on YouTube if you want. And so we have these once a month. And actually, we've got 2 coming up in October, but But the Intergalactic is kind of our monthly webinar, and you can go check those out. They're free to register, and those are done on Zoom. And we make those recordings available like right after the Zoom call. Zoom makes those videos available, and we also post those up on YouTube as well. If you can't attend live, you can always register and view it after the fact. We've got other live events coming up, things in San Francisco and different tech conferences that Postman's going to be a part of. So we're excited about our involvement in all of those. But today we're going to get into this article here. Let me copy this link. I'll show it in my browser here, and I'll make sure to drop this in chat as well. So we've expanded our capabilities on Postman to handle what we call server-sent events in Postman, or SSE. And Girder actually went through and wrote out a really great blog post, and we're going to demo some of this for you today. And so we're going to get into what are server-sent events and how is it going to help us with debugging and working with streaming APIs like gRPC and WebSocket and so on. And so we're going to go through kind of like an interview format here, and we're going to get the team to sort of share out their screen and talk a little bit about like why did we build this, what is it useful for, and then we'll get into demoing and so on. So Apoorv, let's start with you. Let's talk a little bit about like what are server-side events? Like what is it about these streaming protocols? Because a lot of folks that are going to be watching the video, they're going to be very familiar with REST APIs, but there are other kinds of APIs out there as well, like WebSocket and async APIs and gRPC and so on. How do these server-side events play into those, and why did we have to sort of build out this new functionality in Postman?
Yeah, sure. That's a good start actually. So as you rightly said, right, we all have interacted with REST APIs or HTTP APIs in one way or another. And we know like typical HTTP request, the client sends a request and the server reverts back with a response. And that's it. That's the end of the transaction, and that's all it has. This works pretty well for most of the use cases, but let's say you have a use case where you want regular updates from server, and as a client, you don't know when those updates would be available, right? So actually, let's take an example that would be easier to convey why we need different technologies. So let's say you are building a
Actually, Apoorv, is it possible for you to turn your microphone up a little bit? Your volume is a little bit low.
Is it better now?
It's about the same, actually.
Mm-hmm. Okay, give me a second.
Yeah, no worries.
I think that's the highest I have.
Okay. Yep, that's a little bit better. Great.
Okay. So yeah, as I was saying, let's take an example where you might need different technologies and just simple HTTP requests might not work. So let's say you are building a dashboard of sorts, let's say a sales dashboard, where you're plotting a graph with real-time sales data for an e-commerce merchant, right? So just sending a request and getting a response is not enough. Obviously, you can do it with that, but the experience would be great. The data, the graph, your UI wouldn't be getting updated in real time. What you will be doing with normal HTTP requests is just client sending requests, server reverting back, sort of polling. It could be short, long polling. Client can just repeatedly asking server for same data, right? So what other options do we have? So one other thing that users can do is use WebSockets. WebSockets is just for everyone's intro. WebSockets is just like one connection that allows bidirectional communication between client and server. And talking in context of this use case where you have a sales dashboard and it's just server pushing data, right? There's no communication from client to server. So WebSocket would work well, but it would be an overkill. It would be a more complex solution to a more simpler problem, because though WebSocket is very powerful, it comes with a bit of overhead, bit of a startup cost, and you need to manage a lot of things. So for this use case, this is where server sentiments comes in, right? So
just to clarify, sorry, just to clarify a little bit. So
Mhm.
with a REST API, if you want to get updated information, you've got to establish your connection, fetch data, close the connection, and like you mentioned with long polling or even short polling, you're doing those connections a lot. With WebSockets, you're kind of holding that connection open while you're sending those requests back and forth. But you mentioned there's a lot of extra overhead in that, and that's not maybe as efficient as it could be. Okay, so then getting into server-side events, then
If
how
I
is
can
that?
chime in, if
Yeah.
I can chime in. Yeah. So one good way most people would have seen this in the recent events is ChatGPT. So in ChatGPT, if you give a prompt, what the system could have done is just thrown a response to you. But instead, what the UI tries to do is it streams that response and types it on the screen,
It looks like
as if
somebody's actually typing it.
somebody is
Yeah.
actually typing it, right? So what they are actually, so if you look at it, it starts and it ends, and the data is now streamed to the user, and the UI also handles it really well. So
Okay.
pretty sure they will come up with an API for this, or there is an API. I'll just find and maybe post a link
Okay.
here.
Okay.
So that's a good
Yeah,
way to understand.
Okay.
exactly. I mean, chat applications are like the bread and butter for WebSocket. I mean, that's a basic use case where we people generally use WebSockets because you need to have a bidirectional communication. It's not just client sending data or just server sending data. So that's a very good use case for WebSockets. And the thing I said about the overhead that comes with WebSocket. So WebSocket in general is a bit complex. It has an initial cost to it. You are working with a raw TCP connection. So as a consumer, you need to manage all that on your end. So if your use case is straightforward and does not require the things that WebSocket offers, you might look for something else, right? And as I was saying, that's for that particular use case or something where the client just want to receive data from server at regular intervals. And this is where server sentiments comes in actually.
Okay.
So server sentiments, in essence, right, it's not a separate protocol. It's not anything new out of the box. It's just a layer on top of the HTTP protocol, right? So it's a technology, it's a concept layered over HTTP, which allows server to regularly push data to client once the client establishes the connection. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. And then you mentioned like sending it at specific intervals of time. Is that something that the client can actually configure? Like, hey, send me this every 5 seconds, or is that something that the server would configure? Like, I'm just going to send you this every 5 seconds, or is that something that would actually be sort of communicated between the two? Like the client would ask for it, and the server would configure itself in order to send these events on those regular intervals. Is that how that works?
So the frequency of these events is actually not part of the RLC of the spec of server
Okay.
send events. It depends totally on the use case. So like if you know that as a client, if you know the frequency at which you want the data and it's not that high, you can even go for long polling as well. So totally depends on your use case. There are certain things that would be better in case of long polling, but there are certain things that would be better in case of server sentiment. So yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Cool. And then I believe you've got some demo that you want to show us as well with this. So let's switch over and share your screen. And I'm going to close the chat overlay, but if we do see some questions come in, we will definitely pop those up on screen, and we'll discuss those kind of as we go. What are you going to demo here? Like, what are you going to show us here?
So I was thinking, let's give our audience a brief before why we actually went for server sent events.
Okay.
Before we show what we built it.
Sure.
Right. So I mean, it would be a natural question at this point, like why server send events now? It's not a new technology; it has existed for a while, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Postman, like before 2021, was inherently an HTTP client. There was this only HTTP request, the REST request that you could test with Postman, debug with Postman, and rest of the things, documentation, log pointer, right? But back in 2021, when we even before started thinking about adding support for things like WebSockets, gRPC, right? Uh, we sat down and we envisioned like what the future of API clients would be, and
Mm.
how Postman and how developers can leverage Postman, right, to test their APIs, debug their APIs, and irrespective of the API technology they are using. So how could the Postman fit into their life cycle as a one-stop solution, and you don't have to worry about rest of the things. And from there, we started adding things and laying foundation. And once we knew what we wanted to offer to our users, there was like no looking back.
Mm.
So if you see in last 2 years, we have added support for WebSockets, Socket.io, gRPC, and recently we shipped a new client for GraphQL as well. So it was basically relentless. And while we were doing all this, uh, we actually kind of laid a strong foundation, an engineering foundation for Postman to be a multi-protocol API client, right? So which never existed before. It was just HTTP all the way through. So we laid a good foundation. We added new concepts to our product. For everyone's examples, let's say there was no concept of streaming in Postman, how to represent a stream of responses. So if
Right.
you work with normal HTTP requests, it's just request response, and there's a blob of response, and that's it. But there was no way. How would you represent if there are like stream of responses, multiple events coming in? How would you represent it? How would you organize it? How would you let your users interact with it? So all these concepts got introduced eventually, and they have been getting matured now since last 2 years. So
Right.
all this in its way paved the way for what we are doing now. And
Mm-hmm.
server sentiments or SSE is just one thing, right? A lot of things are coming. So, but more importantly, just to answer why now, we have so server sentiments has been the topmost requested feature on GitHub for Postman, and it's been there for a while. And
Mm.
if you even look at the state of the API report that Postman publishes every year, right? SSE has been in the mix. So we know
Mm.
that there was a high demand from our community. So it was just a no-brainer for us, and we just built it.
Yeah. Awesome. So we had a question come in from LinkedIn. Do we have WebSocket support in Postman? Yes, we do. You can check out our learning center for how to implement those and how to use those as well.
Like,
Cool. Okay. So someone else was asking, like, how do we actually use this in Postman? So I think we got a pretty good background of like what server-side events are, why we built it in, the state of the API. We send out this survey every year. I think last year we had about 38,000 people respond to that survey. And as Apurva was saying, like we take that survey very seriously. We listen to all that kind of feedback in order to determine, folks like Iridar, our product managers, go through all of that data and they try to prioritize, like, this is what our users want. Is there a way that we can build this in? What's our timeline going to be? So we definitely listen to that feedback, and we appreciate everybody sending in their survey responses and so on. We do that every year, I believe. Cool. So do we want to go into a demo then and show a little bit about how this actually works inside of Postman?
yeah, let's do that.
All right, cool. Let's share your screen here. And again, I'm just going to close up the chat window for now. But if we do see some questions come in for the team, absolutely keep asking questions about how this works, and we'll do our best to answer those kind of as we go.
Cool. So to get started with server elements in Postman, just open up your good old HTTP tab, enter your server URL and click send. So that's it. I mean, no new shenanigans. That's all you need to know when you are getting started with SSE in Postman. And that was one of the key constraints that we worked with when we were adding support for it. So we wanted our users to have a minimal overhead when they are like interacting with something new, such as SSE in Postman. So that was one of the key idea. So if I just show the interface right now, it's pretty much how your regular HTTP tab looks like. It has the URL, everything that you can configure in HTTP, the params, the headers, authorization, all exist as it is. And but the new thing that is there is the difference in the response section. So before I actually dive into what all are there in this area, I'll actually show from where this is coming. So as one of our users was asking if we have support for WebSocket or not. So we do have it. And this we shipped a while ago. So pretty standard stuff. You can add your URL, connect, and send messages. This is how the stream looks like. So this was like the inception point that I was talking about earlier. Like how would we represent stream of data in our graph, right? So there you can see you have the outgoing messages that you sent, and then there are the incoming messages the server sent back. And this is what we actually picked up, abstracted in a way, polished it a bit, and added to server sent events as well. So these are the new concepts that we polished a bit over the few years. But more importantly, we also were aware of the fact that we don't want to make things too generic. So it does not feel like you are actually working with a dedicated client that supports SSE, because there are nuances to every protocol. And we as a debugging client know that those are important when you are developing your APIs, when you're building your APIs, right? So there are nuances. There are those little things in SSE as well, and we made sure that we tweak our interface just that little bit to incorporate all those specific things with SSE here. So it's a good experience when you are developing your APIs.
Okay.
So yeah, but before I actually show those micro interactions or micro improvements, I'll actually show what a single event in server, like the event that server sends looks like. So there's a structure to it. It's not just free form thing that server can send. There's a defined structure and defined fields, so what server can send. So the SSE RFC defines like how your event can be structured. And it's basically a blob of key value pairs, and keys are called fields. And the RSC says that your keys could be event, retry, data, or ID. Anything else gets totally ignored. These are the only 4 things that are supported. Now to just talk about what these fields are. Data is basically your core payload that you want to send. That's the crux of your message. Event defines what event handler would be fired on client. So that is what it does. If you don't provide it, it fires a message event handler called message by default. So that's that. And then SSE has this reconnection logic mechanism actually built into the spec itself. So when we are discussing how SSE separates itself from WebSocket, so SSE has this reconnection thing built into it, while WebSocket, when you're working with WebSocket, these all things you need to handle yourself. So there's no guidelines how you need to do that. So yeah, that's the overhead thing I was talking about earlier.
So it still gives you some flexibility for how you want to implement this. You're not forced into like one particular way. So the team built this out in a way that gives you flexibility, whether you're using WebSockets, gRPC, whatever, to kind of set up these events however you need to for your own application. Is that right?
Yeah. So for this, there is in SSE there's a flexibility to an extent, and what data you can send. But the different fields that you need to define, those are like fixed from the spec. So any data that you want to send needs to go in the data field. This data field can contain any like text-based data, plain text, JSON, or anything. So one thing to note here as well is in SSE you can only send text-based data. I mean, practically you can send binary as well, but SSE was never built for sending binary data. So it's not optimized for that.
So you'd have to do something like a UU encode, UU decode, or whatever, if you're going to get into like binary data, you know, to actually send that as ASCII text, because this is expecting ASCII text, is what you're saying?
Yeah. So everything that is being sent in SSE gets UTF-8 encoded over the wire. So if you want to send binary data, what you can do is just encode your binary data using base64 encoding and then send it. That would work actually, but it's not optimized for that. The byte overhead would kick in. And and like in general as well, if you want to use send binary data over the wire, WebSocket or gRPC are more suited to it because they have those things in place that optimizes sending those data.
Right. Now, on your output right now, on line 3, you're sending just a string as your data. On line 7, looks like you're sending like a JSON payload. Is there a way to technically determine ahead of time, like I'm sending this as just a string, or I'm sending an actual JSON payload? Like, does it send a header or like a content type back with it as well, so that you know how to unpack it? Or is that just something that you're going to have to know as you communicate with the server, that you're only going to get JSON data back, or you're only going to get it in XML format? Like, you have to know that ahead of time, or is there like a header that comes with this that lets you know what format that data is going to be?
Yeah, right. Good question, actually. So we have that content type header in HTTP, right? But it's not, in case of SSE, it only comes when your response starts coming in. So it only comes once. It does not come for each event individually.
Mm-hmm.
So it's up to the client to know this is text or JSON. But anyway,
Gotcha.
it's all text based. So if it is JSON, that client should be capable of passing it. And to answer, actually, show that what we were discussing right now. So Postman as a client don't know if this would be text or JSON through some header or not. But we do predict that if it's text, we already show text. If it is JSON, we already detect it and select JSON for you here. You can always change
so
it.
the Postman application is trying to make that determination, but you, like,
Yeah.
when you're actually doing this in production, you're going to have to know this yourself when you're building this out.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, because we had a question come in from Chad. Is it necessary to define the content type? And what Apurva was saying is, like, you have to define it once, but then it's going to be up to the client then to understand, like, the server is going to be sending you these events in this data format, and unpack it, or decode it or whatever accordingly.
Right. And just to answer that, so for server sent events, there's a specific content type header that server needs to send, so that client knows it's like a stream of events and not just one response. So for server sent events, it's text/event stream that actually communicates
Okay.
to client that it will be a stream of events and not just a one-time response.
Okay. Can we use that in test code then? Oh, I see. Oh, yeah. So for the actual content coming back, text event stream, and not like, application JSON or something like that. Okay. When it comes to testing and debugging this, though, what sort of considerations would we need to take into account for, like, how would we test that these messages are streaming back properly? Like, I've played a little bit with gRPC within Postman, and I know that you can say, like, hey, if I expect a stream of data to come back, and I expect the third message in that stream to hold this data, and so on. Is it the same sort of testing scenario that you would set up with server-side events, or is it a little bit different as far as how you would actually test and debug this?
Right. So right now, the current experience that we have, it caters to the L0 use cases where you want to connect to a server that supports SSE, and you just want to test visually. But as this matures a bit, we are going to introduce more sophisticated testing interfaces that you talked about in gRPC and stuff like that's coming. And that's actually one of the things that we are actively working on. So right now, if for every one of us, HTTP has the concept of scripts that executes when your request gets sent, right? So there's a pre-request script that gets executed before your request gets sent, and there's a test script that gets executed once the connection is once you receive the response. So right now for server send events, and we know that our users love writing scripts in Postman, but for server send events, the pre-request script works as it is, as it does for any typical HTTP request, but the test script has some limitations to it right now. And it only executes when the server closes the connection successfully. So if there's any other case, like if I close it explicitly from here, the test scripts won't execute. Or if server closes the connection with an error, the test scripts won't execute as of now. But yeah,
Okay,
this
that's
is
good to know.
this is the limitation we are aware of.
So
Actively
if the server closes the connection, then the test code will actually run, and it's going to run on all of the messages that came back, right? Like it's
yeah.
going to look
So
at the entire payload that came back.
yeah, so your entire payload would look something like this. So this is an example I created from this request itself, and it would look something like this. So people aware with PM APIs, your PM.response would have this complete blob of data right now. But yeah, we know this can be optimized for streaming use cases. We have done that in gRPC. And as it matures a bit and as we understand our users' use cases, that will come.
Okay. So for the time being, until the team continues to build this out, you'll have to do a little bit of parsing of that data to actually, split those into the individual events that came back and evaluate, did they come back in the right order? Did I get the right kind of data? You're going to have to do some of that work manually until more of the testing gets built out and so on. Okay. But this is a good step in the right direction for doing this for sure. Okay. Cool. Anything else that you want to show us here?
Yeah, that's actually a lot.
Yeah.
So as I was explaining, like how an individual event structure looks like. Now, when you're developing or when you're building your API, you would want this all information there somewhere in the interface so that you can go and check it if it's correct or not, or if it's coming rightly or not. And that's how you can navigate this interface as well. So, for example, this is one event, and you can expand to see the data property, the data field. This is your data field. This would be your event field. And if you want to look at the metadata like the ID or the retry, you can just go and hover over this info icon and even copy this ID. So the reason why we have copy here because there's this concept in server-sent events that so I said right there's a reconnection mechanism built into the spec, and this ID plays a crucial role in it. So let's say my connection drops after I receive this event, and it just dropped after that. So when the client next time retries that connection, the client can send this ID as part of the request header, and the server would know that this was the last event the client received, and then server can send rest of the events from there. But yeah, obviously the server needs to have that capability of buffering or caching those events till then. But yeah, the core specs supports it.
Okay, awesome. No, that's nice that they built that in so that if you do get disconnected, you can kind of resume, like pick up where you left off. So.
Yeah.
All right, awesome.
Yeah, that's the other thing that's there is this reconnection timer. So again, relates to that only. So this basically specifies to the client that after how many milliseconds that you should retry, even attempt to retry. So for this case, this would be 500 milliseconds.
Right. We had a question show up in chat. Maybe you can answer this one. How can we listen to the Socket.io client send event on Postman? Is that an event that we can sort of capture and use in our scripting?
So if I understand that correctly, you can add your events that you want to listen to here. So for example, right now I've added message as the event that I want to listen to as a client. And when, let's say I connect to this server, I'm listening to this message. So if the server emits any data on this event, right, it would show up here. So let's say I send a message on the message event and the server responds back on the same event channel with some data. So that is how you can subscribe to these events.
Okay. And then we had another question, how do we handle error conditions? So you mentioned, like, for example, if the server disconnects with an error, then it's not going to run that test code. So is there a way that we can sort of handle those errors in a good manner?
Right. So it's like any regular HTTP request. So if server disconnects or the connection closes with some error, you'll see that error code or the status code show up here, and there would be a detailed error message here as well, explaining what went wrong. So yeah.
But as you mentioned earlier, if something disconnects with an error, it's not actually going to run the test script now. It's something that the team is working at building. So so if something does disconnect with an error, there's no way right now to handle that. Other than seeing it, like you'll see it in this output, but there would be no way in a test to actually capture that error. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah, not for now.
But definitely something that the team is working on. So it will be coming. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and not just that. So we know. So again, the things that we have done in the last couple of years all coming together. We know that when users are working with a streaming type protocol, let's say SSE or WebSocket, executing test just at the end of the connection is not enough. We know there are use cases that exist that you might want to run your test every time a message comes in, and not just at the end. So that is what we have also in mind to bring some concept of an on message script that would execute every time a message comes in. So that's in early discussion, and let's see how it goes.
Awesome. All right. Cool. Well, Girder, let's chat a little bit about your side of it. So I think that's a pretty good intro into like the server side events, but like what are some other ways that we can actually use these, or what are some other things that that your team has been working on that we can sort of talk about and maybe demo here as well?
Yeah, sure. I think Apo did a pretty amazing job of covering the depth of server sentiments and also maybe WebSockets. So maybe I can demo and talk about something that we shipped recently. This is the OAuth 2 token refresh that users have been asking for the past couple of years. And maybe I can just walk through with it and you can see.
Sure.
My my screen is already up. Thanks. So let me quickly give a gist of what OAuth 2 does. OAuth 2 is a authentication protocol that helps users authenticate into apps. So if you've used any sort of sign in with Google or sign in with Facebook, that is OAuth 2 in play over there. What actually happens is the user signs in using a third-party authorization service, and there is a handshake that happens through which a temporary access token gets generated and sent to the client. Now, the cool thing about this token is that it's short-lived by default and by nature. Now, what this means is the token expires itself after a set time. So this can be anywhere from 5 minutes to 1 hour. So what I have here is a Spotify playlist. And look here, I've generated a token, but this is expired because the token just expires in an hour. Now, what usually people had to do before we released this feature was to again go to get new access token, and they had to verify login again. Basically, they had to re-log in another place, and this is a multi-step process, right? And this was very cumbersome, and this was very it was breaking flows, or it was coming in the way of users to do this. Now with this token refresh feature, what you can do is just press this button, and it will just refresh the token for you, and your your app is good to go. We also went ahead and built an auto refresh feature where you don't even have to move a muscle. So all you have to do is turn this on, and Postman automatically.
Can you scroll up on your screen a little bit to show the auto refresh?
Oh yeah.
There we go.
Oh yeah. Sorry. So this was actually turned off, and I turned it on. So what Postman does is, as you can see, this token will expire at 11:07 p.m. This is Indian time, but this expires in an hour. So an hour from now, this expires, and I can't use this token anymore. So if I hit any of this URL, so this is a URL, this is a Spotify URL, what you'd be getting is a 401, which is unauthorized or expired access. Right. So instead, if you have this turned on, now what happens is these tokens get automatically refreshed as long as the server has sent you what is something called a refresh token. So a refresh token is used to refresh the access token that you get from the server. I know this is getting a bit too technical in terms of authorization, but Yeah, just bear with me on that one. So as long as Postman has this token, which is usually sent by the service, we are, we are good to go. We'll automatically refresh it no matter where you are. So anytime you send a request, we check if the token is expired. If it's expired, we refresh it automatically. You won't even see a thing. It just happens all
It just
seamlessly.
happens. That's great.
Yeah. Also, this is now integrated with Runner as well. So if you are doing any long-running jobs where your token needs to be refreshed every 5 seconds, whatever, right? So your Runner automatically refreshes it as and when it expires.
And that's the collection runner within Postman. So
Yeah,
if
the
you've got a
collection
number
runner.
of things, yeah. So if you have a
Yeah.
number of requests in a collection and you use the collection runner, this is also
Yeah.
going to update that.
Yep. Yep.
And that just
So-
happens just by turning that flag on. The collection
Yeah.
runner is
Just-
automatically going to refresh that for you.
Yeah. All you have to do is turn this flag on, and you'll be good to go.
Okay. Is there a way to turn that flag on programmatically, like with the Postman API? Is there a way to turn that on?
Not currently, no.
Okay.
This all happens locally in your system. The reason for that is because all this token that you see, right? So this is, by the way, I don't want you to see the full token, but whatever you see here is, what do you call it? It's all user sensitive data, and it's all stored just in your machine, and it does not go out at all. So it does not leave your machine even if you explicitly want it to, unless you copy paste and give it to someone. This is all safe, and we build this with security in mind so that nothing leaves your machine, and everything, all the refreshing and all the token trade-off is all that happens in your machine itself.
Okay.
So
if somebody wanted to use this with Postman CLI or Newman, though, would they be able to use this auto refresh token as part of that collection?
That is one of the limitations we have right now.
Okay.
So currently,
just because it is
Yeah.
kind of user sensitive data, we don't actually
Yeah.
export that. So
Yeah.
that is a limitation right now. Okay.
Yeah.
Good to
So Newman monitors, all of that don't support this right now. But anything inside Postman, request sending, collection runner, even flows. If you're building like a long flow where your flow takes a bit of time, and by the time your access token also expires, flow automatically refreshes this token for you, and
Okay. Someone's asking in chat, can they manually set that refresh time, or is that only based on the expiration that comes back from the server?
Yeah, so this limit is actually set by the server. If you see here, this is something that Spotify, prescribes, saying that, hey, this is my access token, and I will not let this access token be valid for more than an hour. They actually say this is 3,600 seconds. They send it in seconds, but they say that it can't be, more than an hour. So whatever the authorization server sets as a time is what you get.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, awesome. Cool. Anything else that you want to demo for us while we're here?
Yeah, there's also one more nifty feature that we recently released, which is around sending examples. So examples has been there forever since Postman started. Now, people usually use examples to document their collections, but also secret case option B is for documenting all the possible variations that you can do on a particular request. Now, if you see here, I have a generic request called gRPC where I'm taking an environment ID. But if I want to, give a few examples of how this API would work, I don't want to create new requests. Instead, what I would do is pass this ID on and save them as examples. Now, if you see here, I pass some ID, but this actually, this returns the gRPC point for Pink Floyd. So
good
this has
choice of
this.
music. Good choice of music artist, by the way. I approve.
Yeah. So I put all my 3 favorite bands in no particular order. But yeah,
add Disturbed to that list, and you got my average afternoon playlist going. So
sure. So what usually happens is if someone comes to this API, right, they don't know what ID to use here. So that's why you usually give some examples to see how to use it. So earlier on, when this try button was not there, what people used to do was you had to copy this, this part of the URL. You either go here and you do the uh, uh, not so cool thing of changing the original collection over here, and God forbid if you save it, you save the collection, right? We didn't want all of that to happen, and these are just shortcuts. And this was just the request URL, right? What if you had a raw body over here? That was a JSON body. So you will have to copy all this, put this back. There's a lot of stuff that can go wrong, right? So instead, what we did was now that you've saved examples, now you can just try them. So this will just send the request with all the tests that are originally there in the original request. So if you see, the get artist had a bunch of tests that I've written here that does a bunch of things. So trying out this example also ensures that the tests are intact, and we just change the right parts of the request that needs to be tried on. So here we just take the this part, the ID part, and we still retain the tests and everything. So very nifty if you want to send this to people, and makes it very easy if you want to try all these examples just to get a flavor of how the API works without putting any effort into authoring it or setting variables or anything of sorts.
Right. Great.
I think we have a bunch of questions. I think there's someone asked about Azure pipeline. Let me just read it. Yeah, Richard. So if your Azure auth provider returns a refresh token, make sure you're on the latest version of Postman. And as long as we get the refresh token, we can just you can just use either the token refresh, the manual token refresh here, or you can turn on auto refresh token here. In case you are not able to do it, please get in touch with us either on support or through the community channels.
Cool. All right. And then Apurva, I think you wanted to demo something else. Is that right? You want to go through something?
Yeah, I can show some future improvements that we have planned. Okay, cool. So there's a concept of examples that Giridhar was just demoing, right? The way you can document your various scenarios for your single request, various successful scenarios, various error scenarios, right? And that experience for the server-side events is not up to the mark from at least our expectation. We know that this could be improved a lot. So actually, let me show you how it looks like currently.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you now save this as an example, this is what you get, just a blob of response, which works for now, but it's not ideal. It's not how you would imagine interacting with a stream of data, right? It's just a blob in a text editor. It could be much better.
Right. Okay.
And we thought about it, and we recently shipped something similar for gRPC. So gRPC, I'll not get into much detail, but has all these different types of methods, and few of it you can also stream data similar to server-side events. It has a bidirectional stream. It has a unidirectional stream from client to server, server to client. So same, pretty much similar in that sense. And for this, this is your example. This is how it looks like.
Right.
It's more natural in the way that now, since you're interacting with the stream, your example also should look like that. And these are your individual events or messages in gRPC. You can edit them here. Even you can drag and drop, reorganize them, reorder them, depending upon each scenario that you want to document. So gRPC has these both incoming and outgoing messages, since it's a bidirectional method. you can have these switches and switch out method types.
Oh, interesting.
So these nifty little interactions, we know these can all be ported to servers and events, and that's what we plan to do. So yeah, look out for that. This interface is going to get much better.
That's very cool. Neat. Awesome. Okay. Cool. Anything else that you folks want to discuss before we start to wrap up? So when we do the how we built it streams, we tend to make them a little bit shorter than so we'll only be about an hour. But anything else that you want to discuss before we wrap up? And if not, that's okay too.
Yeah, that's I think
all right. All right, cool. Well, really appreciate both of your time today, Purva. We like to wrap up our streams with community shoutouts. So if you want to like shout out anybody on your team or anything special coming up or anything that you're working on that you kind of want to tease, anything like that, and you're welcome to do that. I've got a handful of things that I want to share, but I'll let you guys go first. Anyone on your team you want to shout out? Anything going on?
Not sure if it's my connection. I have something to shout out for.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to shout out to the community for being super active and voicing your opinions on GitHub, Twitter, and multiple places, right? So I want to emphasize that all the PMs, developers, we are really here to listen and understand how you use Postman and how we can make it better. So all of us are on GitHub, Twitter, constantly listening to what the community is talking about, and we really appreciate for all the feedback, all the feature requests, all the inputs that we have been getting. So I think this is like a constant shout out. I go anywhere I do a presentation on Postman. It's really the community that's driving our products, right? So just want to give a huge shout out to you folks.
Yeah, definitely big thank you for everyone that uses the community forum. And as Girdar was saying, like we've got open GitHub, issues and things like that where you can go and post bug reports. If you've got features that you'd like to see in Postman, you can definitely those. All of our product managers sit down and take serious look at those, as well as the state of the API. It tends to come out towards the end of the year, but we always appreciate the survey. Anything you want to shout out?
So I think actually Giridhar covered that part. I mean, the community has been driving us, and as I mentioned earlier as well, right? Why servers and events came into picture, came into the light. It was all driven by a community, the constant feedback that we get, and it's just not restricted to this, but everywhere. Anything we write about, anything we want to do, our community has been super helpful in that. So yeah, that's been great.
Super. All right. Looks like my microphone is not working very well suddenly, so I'll make mine a little bit brief. But we do have the intergalactic sessions coming up. I'm going to share that link again here in chat. They are free to register, and we do make those videos available after the fact. We put all of our videos up on YouTube, so you can definitely go check those out. Huge shout out to everyone on the team. We're coming out with a lot of blog content and video content very soon, so keep an eye on our YouTube channel, keep an eye on our blog as well. Share. So I'm going to drop the link for the server-side events blog post again that Girdar wrote up, and so you can definitely go check that if you want to go play with this a little bit more. Again, we're happy to take feedback on it. The team is continuing to kind of evolve this and work on this as far as like handling errors and some of the debugging and so on. But hopefully this will expand your capabilities within using Postman. We always love hearing feedback from folks. Definitely check back with us on all of that. So Apurva and Girdar, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for sharing a little bit of like the engineering effort that went into what you built and why we built it. Of course, we built it for our users, but why was it the right time? how did we get started on this. We're definitely going to keep iterating on this and build this out. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your teams for putting this stuff together for us. We'll catch everybody on the live stream next week. So the other thing, the blog post that I shared earlier that that Davo had written about the documentation collection format, Davo is actually going to do a live stream next week on that. So anyone that was curious on what this new collection format documentation is about, you can check our live stream next week. Davo is going to get into a lot more. So thanks again, everybody. We'll catch everyone on the live stream next week. And stay safe out there, stay warm, stay cool. We'll catch you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Yeah.